supply availability. I think that's been pretty well put to rest by the Colorado School of Mines Potential Gas Committee reports. And the other issue is price volatility, and as I indicated, I hope longer term that will be somewhat dampened. And with less volatile prices, an enormous supply of natural gas, we expect natural gas to be the leader in the nation in a carbon reduction over time. Tom.
Just to follow up on that, thank you. Just to follow up on that, so in climate change legislation, what do you think needs to be done or changed to either promote natural gas or maybe reduce the reliance on, say, coal, which has gotten a lot of financial incentives to try to become a clean energy source?
I would say there are two parts. On the segment that the American Gas Association focuses, which is residential, commercial, and industrial customers, you should look at this segment and say they have been reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Probably the best approach is not put them under a cap and trade system, but continue to implement the policies and programs that have led to actual reductions in those sectors, and that's efficiency measures, conservation, and just the improvements generally in the sector that have led to, on an average, something over 1% reduction every year, year after year, decade after decade, in greenhouse gas emissions per capita. The other approach would be on the gas-fired electric generation. The Senate bill looks more like a placeholder provision. It's not fully fleshed out, but would create incentives for electric generators to use natural gas. And I expect that area will continue to develop in the legislative front.
Good morning. For Chris, Tyler Suiters, Clean Skies News. This probably requires a subjective answer, Chris, but how close are we to peak storage?
Well, EIA defines peak storage. The ultimate design capacity being about 4.3 trillion cubic feet for working gas. That's a large number. The operationally full number, we don't normally reach the design limit. They've put it somewhere between 3.8 and 3.9 trillion cubic feet. Now, we are at 3.6 trillion cubic feet right now. We have at least 4 to 5, perhaps even 6 weeks of net injections still ahead of us. The analytical community has been talking about a net storage full when we enter the winter heating season at something around 3.8 TCF, essentially full. And that's extraordinary. When AGA was doing the weekly storage numbers and collecting that statistically, we extrapolated to a full number of somewhere around 3.2 to 3.3 trillion cubic feet. So there has been real growth in storage capacity in the country over the last decade. And that's not only growth then for the financial arbitrage opportunities that are there in our market, but it is real capacity to meet physical needs for consumers.
Doesn't the variable of pressurization play a factor as well?
Yes, I mean, but every facility is engineered. Every facility has a specific target. They're actually contracted with the shippers and others that are putting gas into storage. And those facilities are managed around certain specific physical requirements. Now, one thing I would say is that, again, going back to when we did the storage report, whenever we got to a critical point, storage seemed to be a little more flexible than everybody thought it was. And that's tended to go that way. And now we have more capacity. So, again, I'll note those numbers that I noted before. 15 to 20% of our total winter heating season supply coming from working gas, 30% during a cold winter heating season month. And if you're a company in the Midwest and it's your coldest day of the year, It could be 50, 60, 70. It could be 100% of your gas supply coming from storage. So it's a very, very important factor this year.
Looking at John Rickman with the Energy Daily, looking over some of what you handed out, there's something here about changing the definition of energy use under DOE's, looking at the appliances. The way I read this is, are you saying that the way EPA looks at the life cycle emissions, are you saying that that should be transferred? Do you agree with the life cycle emissions that EPA is using, and are you saying that should be transferred elsewhere?
Yes. I think over time, when you move to a carbon-constrained focus, you always have to look at life cycle. I don't know anyone who looks at carbon emissions and says it's just at the point where it's combusted. And the environmental groups, and in fact everyone who is involved in greenhouse gas emissions, says it's a life cycle measurement. Wells to wheels was the famous DOE lab work on that. We believe in two things, and they're complementary. One is you must, of course, look at the total emissions, and natural gas tends to shine in that regard. And the other is you need to, if you're talking about energy efficiency, you need to measure energy efficiency. Most energy is lost. 70% of energy before it is ultimately used is lost, is dissipated, is wasted. And that's in every form. The car you drive has a gasoline engine that's 21% efficient. Almost 80% of the energy is lost in heat or out the exhaust pipe. So what you really want to look at when you're looking at either greenhouse gas emissions or efficiency is how do you keep from losing that energy? And natural gas is incredibly well positioned on energy efficiency because the gas comes out of the ground under pressure, natural pressure. It then goes in the pipes. You just need to add some compressor fuel to move it across the country. So you have very little energy loss in the whole process of getting gas to the home or business or electric generation unit. It is then, when it's transformed, that you get your energy loss. But a combined cycle electric generation unit's running close to 60%, home furnaces well up there, upper 80s and higher. So you have an incredibly efficient use of the energy. DOE, historically, when they measure how efficient appliances are, look just at the appliance. An electric water heater is going to look very efficient because all the energy loss took place before that electricity got to the home. When it gets to the home, it's quite efficient. Gas, on the other hand, makes this energy transformation in the home. It's incredibly efficient till it gets to the home, then you get your energy loss. Why don't we look at the whole cycle for all of these things to figure the efficiency? So you look at an electric water heater, for example. It's going to produce about twice the greenhouse gas emissions, if not more, than a typical gas water heater. It's going to be highly inefficient in terms of the amount of energy that's used to power that water heater. But if you look at the DOE ratings, it would be rated as more efficient. That doesn't make a lot